Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our digital live. My name is Jenna Steele, and I'm one of the field managers here at Digital Summer Clinic. I'm here with Lily Grinsteiner, who is also a field manager. And we will be talking with Bud Gibson, who is the director of Digital Summer Clinic and the founder of it.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Bud, and thank you for everybody tuning in. We're really looking forward to this conversation today. And for those of you guys watching, feel free to drop your questions as you come up with them in the chat, and we will get to them during the Q&A section later on. Alrighty, well, to kick things off, Bud, would you mind introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about your professional experience?
Well, what's sort of funny is we were talking right before this, and I said, you do know that I have like 40 years of experience, right? So how am I going to summarize that? But let me just kind of say right now that I've been teaching in business schools, starting off at the University of Michigan, and then for the past 19 years at EMU. So it was basically 9 years at U of M, 19 years at EMU. That makes 28 years. So a big part of that experience has been teaching and teaching in business schools. And the funny thing is I started off in college myself as a liberal arts major. I was a French and linguistics double major, and we used to laugh at the business students because we felt like they weren't really doing anything over there. And then I started going around. I worked a bit. I worked in Morocco. I worked in Saudi Arabia. I worked in Egypt. I lived a lot in the Middle East, North Africa, and also in Europe. And I realized, oh my goodness, a business degree would really come in handy here because there was a lot of stuff I just didn't get about how the business world worked. So I went back and got an MBA at the Wharton School, then continued in consulting and decided this is a crazy idea. I said, well, I need to go get a PhD because, I want to understand what knowledge is all about. So I got a PhD at Carnegie Mellon University about the time the World Wide Web was coming into place. And it was sort of amazing, the fact that you could go see things happening in real time in a place like Paris, France, where I'd lived for a while as a teenager. And so I thought, wow, this is really a big deal. And so I got into business school, and business schools are not the quickest to react to change. And I was saying, this is the new wave, okay? And we need to get on it. And at the time, the dean of the University of Michigan Business School, as it was called, was saying, well, the internet is just a fad. That's since become the Ross School. Well, the internet was not a fad. And here we are today. It's transformed our lives. So ultimately, I transitioned over to Eastern, and we had the opportunity to work on a project with Google where we would teach students about digital marketing and get free use of Google AdWords for nonprofits to the tune of $10,000 a month. So I thought, well, this is great because that's basically most people get to what they want on the web via search. And if you're going to design websites, you've got to really understand what's drawing people to the website. So I started on that, and I realized that at Eastern, our students didn't really have the platform that they have at a place like University of Michigan, where you guys are both from. So I said, well, okay, why don't we start doing stuff? And so we developed a course called the Search Marketing Practicum that I offered for a number of years. We started a workshop, which is really sort of a conference, but we call it a workshop. And all of that was designed to get students connected with the community and connected with real world experience that they could use to then wedge their way into jobs. And I think we started the workshop about 15 years ago. In fact, this will be, if I correct, I think it's our 15th year of doing it. We took that Search Marketing Practicum and turned it into what we're doing today with the Digital Summer Clinic. Started off unpaid. In fact, students paid to take the course. And now we're paying a bit over $19 an hour for students to work with companies. we grew that part of it from getting 20 applicants in the first year, uh, 11 years ago, to just under 700 this year. And we place 48 students with 24 companies. Courses are still going strong at EMU. The workshop is still going strong. It's very locally focused. So, that's me in a nutshell. Okay, started liberal arts, became business, tried to think about how to get students employed.
Well, I didn't know half of that story, and that was awesome. I think that I'm sure Lily could talk about this as well. That we have a valuable, very valuable director, but like you have
For sure.
lots of experience, especially in the digital world, and this is what we know, but you have the whole story. So I know we've learned a lot from you. But it's really great to have you. We have a few questions to help us get to know you a little bit better, and those watching as well. How did the idea for Digital Summer Clinic come about, and what inspired you 12 years ago to make it? I know you touched on it a little bit, but if there's anything you kind of wanted to add to it.
Well, I think the key thing was this. The I had always been getting asked by companies if I could find a way to get them a student for some kind of internship. And what they wanted me to do was actually then mentor that student while they were in the internship. And of course, that was basically something I would do out of the goodness of my heart versus getting paid for. And you can only do so much of that. It's not that I never do anything out of the goodness of my heart, but that doesn't scale. Your heart is only so big and has only so much goodness. And so we had the opportunity to create a center. Now, you need to understand we didn't get some big funding or something like that, but I managed to negotiate that we would just be able to have the title of center. And then I started going around to people and saying, well, I've been doing this thing with these students, and that had gotten some notoriety in the community. And I'd like to do this clinic, but I'm not entirely sure what it is. And I connected up with this guy from Ann Arbor Spark, Bill Mayer, who said, well, why don't you write us a proposal? We're putting in a proposal to the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, which kind of funds a lot of economic development activities, and you could be part of it. So I wrote a proposal with sort of a pilot study, and I always recommend smaller, in other words. I always recommend starting out that way, and little proof of concept gets people to believe. And then we that worked, and ultimately we came along a few years later. We were at 24 students, not 20. I think it was 12 students. No, it was 24 students working with 12 companies. And I realized that the problem we were having was we didn't have a big enough budget at that scale to sustain operations throughout the year. So it was kind of like we would stop doing all of that, stop doing our digital summer clinic stuff, then have to come back and re-kick it off the following year. And so I said, well, why don't we double the size of the clinic? and then we'll be able to get a budget that will allow us to do something throughout the year. And so we did that. And the whole idea was, I was thinking, I was getting kind of interest from the business community. I knew students needed some outlets. So I just kind of found an opportunity, and it worked out.
That is so fascinating that all of that experience and working through different incentives and whatever had led you to creating the Digital Summer Clinic, especially coming from creating the Center of Digital Engagement at Eastern, and then you're intertwining with Spark. So that's a long way to have come and to make a clinic from 19 applicants to over 700. So that's really impressive. I have to hand that
just
to you.
Under 700. But
yeah, just under 700, but it's still a big number. You can't discredit it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But our next question is what do you think is the most valuable skill or lesson that the interns from the Digital Summer Clinic learn? And where do you think that these interns typically apply these skills and values?
Well, so one thing that I think is really important, and this is an important life skill, um, is one of the skills they get is resilience. Now, if they have resilience already, then they sharpen it because we put these students in with these smaller companies. And the smaller companies don't have big management structures and internship programs. The students are kind of thrust in there with a couple of founders, and they have a brief, they have a project, but they have to figure out, how to make that project a reality. There's not a lot of resources, so they have to figure out how to achieve that project, with maybe not a lot of money behind it. Often there's enough money to do what's necessary, but there's not really a lot of extra. And so they have to kind of get in there, and they have to pull up their socks, and they have to move forward. So I think that practice and understanding how to figure out what needs to be done in a situation and then do it effectively so that it advances everybody, the business's interests, and then ultimately by advancing the business's interests and achieving something on your own as an intern, you're advancing your interests. And so I'd say resilience is really important. I think the other thing that you have to learn is how to make win-wins. Okay. So I think it's often possible to say, well, I have this boss and, the boss is mean to me, or the boss doesn't quite see the world right, or something like that, which in fact may be true. I've certainly had that experience myself. But so what? How do you get things to work? I think you've got, how do you create a win so that this person who maybe you initially don't understand very well, don't understand their motivations, perhaps, you can make something where they stand up and say, oh, Jenna or Lily, they're really contributing. And then get on your side. So win-win, so you can create allies. So resilience, win-win, so you can create allies, and then ultimately that sparks a virtuous cycle where they may not have a job for you. These are small startup companies. You don't know. I mean, we've had some of them fail. We actually had one fail right in the middle of the clinic, which was sort of bad. But the opportunity may not be there, but the opportunity is ultimately in the network, okay, and the impact that you were able to create.
Yeah, and I think on top of that as well, it's a learning experience for the startups as well. You were speaking earlier, Bud, about some of the owners, founders, CEOs haven't had a chance or the experience to manage interns, and so they go in the outside sources and they ask for advice, and that's exactly what we do as interns. We go to our mentors, we go to you, Bud, we go to Kim, and I think it's just like a win-win, and they can apply all those skills as well, to founders, and just become better founders, better CEOs. It's a win-win
Right.
for everybody. And I have another question for you. Could you describe one or two success stories interns had in the clinic and why those stories stick with you?
Well, actually, yes, I can. So let me kind of hit one off from last year, and we actually had a story done on her this year. Um, Michelle Carls, who is from the University of Michigan School of Information. I'll bring up one from Eastern. But Michelle had kind of gone through the pandemic, then gotten a master's degree, and it looked like she'd done some really impressive projects. But for whatever reason, she just wasn't gaining traction. So we put her with a small um, company called De Novo Fertility that does sort of natural fertility treatments. And she was in there redesigning the website. She worked very well with the team. There were some things. I mean, she was very top of her game in terms of theory of user experience and so on and so forth. But she was able to translate that into real world impact that the De Novo people were able to understand. And I remember having to encourage her to ask them, well, would you take me on maybe to continue working with you because, we've been successful this summer. Well, they didn't have an opportunity, but the person who had been consulting to them had seen Michelle and thought, wow, she's really good. And he heard she, was looking for something. And so now she's working for his uh, private finance company, kind of redoing the websites of the companies he buys. And so, I think that was a success story because and our success stories, I think, are really about people helping people get off the mark towards that really first strong experience. Another example is Nick Woods, who you know as a mentor. And Nick was working at a concrete company when I met him as a student. And, I had to kind of convince him to do the clinic. He was sort of, wasn't really sure what he was doing, trying to figure things out. And, I brought up this experience with him and he said, okay, I'll give it a shot. He wound up working for his startup for a year, a company called Genomenon, the world's largest genomic database. And then he decided he wanted sort of a different challenge, a little more marketing focused. So he moved over to the Carrot, which is the digital marketing agency for General Motors, and managed a number of their brands. And then he ultimately went to work for Google and has been promoted there. And, who knows, new promotions may be in the works. But again, this was somebody who was, basically working his way through school at a concrete company, and kind of got started on a professional path. So that's the kind of success we're trying to generate.
Yeah, I think as being someone who has also had similar experiences as Nick of doing the different kinds of jobs that he did prior to coming into this internship, I can really relate to that story. But it's also really great to hear the two different stories come forward about someone who's working on their master's and then someone who's working for a concrete company. Two very different students. They were pursuing maybe similar, a little bit different things, but they had a great experience with the clinic and they had a great opportunity arise from it. So it's really great to
Yeah.
hear.
And I know, Bud, you have a really good eye for spotting those success stories, and I know I can speak to that as well. But to transition over to the Q&A portion, thank you to everybody who submitted comments. First one for you, Bud, is Kimberly Baker here, one of the mentors here at Digital Summer Clinic, asked, "What is your favorite part of the Digital Summer Clinic?"
Well, what I like is ultimately concluding the clinic, okay? Because by concluding the clinic, we've gone through the whole thing of figuring out which interns to make offers to, getting 48 to accept, connecting them with the companies, bringing them through all of these projects. And there's ups and downs in these projects, okay? I don't want to, you have to struggle a little bit. We talk with everybody, there's always some challenge that people have. So getting through those challenges, figuring out how to bring it to a successful conclusion, which is sort of where we are right now, is successfully concluding your engagement with your company. So you've really gone through a lot and you've really evolved. And so I get great satisfaction in seeing how that works.
Yeah, I think that's also been very rewarding for me and Jenna, I would say, as a field manager, is we get to see some of the success firsthand, or in the experiences of the interns that come along. I'm not necessarily in your position, Bud, where I'm, kind of the face behind it all, making it happen and putting them in these positions, but it's just as rewarding to see it happen. It's very inspiring, I would say. Our next question is from our field manager, Zach. He asks, "What is Bud's favorite language?"
Well, it's kind of interesting. I've always liked languages from when I was like a little kid, and so I think probably my first love was French, and that's because my grandparents had made some money, and they used to go to France all the time, and so I decided I needed to go to France, and my dad said, my dad, who had been in Europe right after the Second World War with the U.S. Army, my dad said, "You need to go abroad. We'll figure out a way to do it." It was kind of expensive. And so I became an exchange student in France, and that was really eye-opening to me. But, I also like Arabic quite a bit. I like the local dialects of Arabic. I like the local dialects of French, and I like all the local dialects of English because of the different ways that people express themselves, which really often reflects different views on the world and reveals something profound about their culture and where they come from. So, probably French because it's been with me the longest, and frankly, it's the easiest to access from here in the US.
Do you have any chances, like recently, to practice your French?
I do on occasion when I do something like go to Canada, or I have some people I know who I communicate with in French. So that helps.
Mhm. Thank you. That's awesome. Final question, and this is a really good one, Bud. How are the companies and interns matched
Well, they're from the aliases. So
from the aliases?
we have an anonymous question asker there. Um, okay, so here's what it is. We have the company submit a project description. Okay, then we go and we determine the skills needed to help in that project description. What kind of person do they need? When we're talking with the interns, we also go through and do a skills assessment. We actually use AI to summarize their statement of purpose and their resume into a few select categories. And we've got this, we really worked on this prompt. It's pretty good. Sometimes it misses. But then if we decide to interview the intern, we then verify that, what we thought, or, in this case, what the AI thought, reading the resume and statement of purpose was, in fact, where they think they're coming from. So we take those two things and we say, okay, let's match people with the places they can do the most good. And then if we know the company and we get some sense of the interns, by the way, during the interview process, then, we can kind of say, okay, they need people with these skills, and in some cases, we know the intern a little bit, and we have some sense of the company, and we think, well, that intern, yeah, and that intern would be able to manage this company pretty well, okay, and I and uh, oftentimes you might need an intern with a strong personality who's able to kind of roll with the punches and keep the ship moving forward. A personable intern who's able to work with somebody who's on occasion prickly. Uh, and, and you get a feel for these things. And often enough, we get it right. We do not always get it right, not 100%. Okay. But I think for the most part, we do.
Yeah, that's super fun. I think I remember when I was applying to the internship, one of the questions that I had when I had an initial coffee chat with another field manager was, what's the matching process between the interns and the companies? And she gave a little bit of a similar answer, but it was basically, Bud does all the magic because he can sense everything. He can sense things about the
Well,
interns and
let's not
match
give me
them.
too much credit there because I miss sometimes, and you have to be ready to go back and kind of fix things when they're broken.
Right, right, right.
Yes, of course, of course. You do have a very keen sense for people, though. I will say, not to discredit that. But before we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to add about anybody that would like to apply or just the clinic in general?
Well, so we'll start taking applications again right at the start of February 2026. So obviously, applications are closed for this year's clinic. We will be doing our digital marketing workshop on the theme of Know Your Customer, November 21st, and tickets for that will go on sale in starting right after Labor Day. Okay, so that's those are kind of the two big things, February, and then look out for that November workshop. And we will be at events in the community in the months of September and October.
Lots of events coming up, and to everybody watching, possibly want to apply, I highly recommend. That's all of our comments, but I just want to say thank you to everybody who joined our digital live.
Yeah, and thank you so much to you, Bud. It was great to have you on. I think I learned something new every time I have a conversation with you. So that's what if that says something about you and your personality, it's a good thing. Don't worry. But yeah, so that was a great way to end up our 2025 Digital Summer Clinic Digital Summer Lives. You are the last one, Bud.
Oh,
But
wow.
for everybody else out there, stay tuned for all of our socials for any updates. You should definitely apply. But yeah, see you guys in the fall.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.